Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are we getting on? Welcome back once again to the Glowing Sea. Today we're going to work on our farming setup, seeing as even ghouls have to eat. So I'm reasonably pleased with this one, so if you like what you see, do hit that big red button. Let's get stuck in. So we're down at the end of the build site here, around the corner from the main building. And I'm planning on putting the field in here, but as you can see we've got a slightly more confined space when it actually came down to it than I anticipated. So we're going to make use of the slope behind us here as well, and put a tiered sort of setup in. My first thought was just to sort of pillar glitch group select the planters in, the big square plots that we've got in USO. I think the USO I did anyway. And sort of line them up and then put a little wall underneath, but getting those level would be a nightmare, so I decided on something a little bit more solid. So we're going to build a frame out of scaffolding and set up the tiers that way and put the sort of garden plots on the top. So this is reasonably simple to do, but it comes with a few challenges because of the variations in elevation, and because as snap happy as the scaffolding is, it can be somewhat temperamental. It sort of snaps wherever it wants to rather than necessarily wherever you had in mind. So the thing to bear in mind is if it's prone to snapping in sort of in another place, but in sort of in relation to where you want it, sometimes it's just a lot easier to go with that and then carry on snapping until it goes into place, and then just pull out the bits you don't need. Which you've just seen once already, and I'll point out again in just a moment. So I'm looking at here is that RV down in the corner I wanted to use as a kind of shed, sort of storage place. So creating a path down the middle here, but I wanted it reasonably narrow. And needed to line it up with the walk up from the other half of the settlement, so that's what we've just done. And I mix up the shorter and the taller scaffolding pieces just as appropriate. Doesn't really make much difference, it's the same amount of resources, but there we go. There's a good example of it not snapping straight into place, but it'll snap in such a way it'll allow you then to snap it in afterwards. Same thing happens with the floor pieces as well, as you can see, they're a bit fussy. So, going to work on tearing this up. It's a little too high there, so we'll nudge it down a bit. They're not all going to be the same height, just because the hill starts off relatively slight in its slope and then steepens up a bit afterwards. And I also didn't want it all to be identical, but a bit of variety in there. There we go, so it's been temperamental while it's snapping again. Kind of work from this angle there. There we go, see it didn't go in where I had in mind, but once we let it drop back into that place, we can then snap straight onto the both of them and it'll work much more easily. Just like that. So we'll carry on that principle and just keep it well, it'll vary in its height, but keep it reasonably similar as well. We'll snap these floors in. So leaving that one in actually made it a lot easier to get the height on this particular level. And then it turned out to be fairly easy afterwards, actually. There we go. So that's the finished product, or at least the tiers anyway. So the next thing you do is get these garden plots in. Planters, I think they're in USO. Oh wait, there we are, yeah. There we go, garden plot, that's the one. So just slap a few of those down and then straighten them up. They're slightly smaller than a standard sized floor piece, so they do fit quite nicely. Most of what we'll be putting in is razor grain. That's my original plan was to put a Brahmin pen in today as well, but that'll either have to be part of another build or possibly in between. We'll see how things go. For some reason that one snapped to the frame rather than the floor. Which it was sort of glitching through there, but get there in the end. So, now you've got the idea on that, you don't need to watch me do it about a dozen more times. Probably more, in fact. So get some stairs in there. These are quarry catwalk stairs. You're in the scaffolding tab as well. But just thought I'd use them for a little bit of variety in there. Plus the rusted texture works quite well with the environment. I haven't used them all the time, so they don't snap. They don't really click through all that well with sort of player-placed objects like the scaffolding. So we'll do for these sort of ways up onto it, but between the levels we'll just stick with the standard scaffolding pieces, as you'll see in a minute. This is not the best way about approaching it, so there we go. Figured it out. Do it side on, you can see what you're doing much more clearly. I'll have to see how the pathing goes with the gap at the top there, but if it's an issue I can always put an invisible rug in there to sort that out. Snap one on there. Just snap two, but don't really like the way that looks, so pull that out and we'll move on the other side. So these are the slim, short ladders I'm using here. I did originally try the broader ones, but they just took up a little bit too much room. And it would have caused a lot more problem when it came to put the razor grain in particular in. So we just went with these. We're going to have one at each end on each level. Let's get them in place, just like that. And there we go, carry on. Down by the RV, you can use a broader one here. Just because it felt better, if I'm honest. And there we go. So I'm just showing you this bit because on the whole, I'm not actually going to put railings around this. Just around these couple of little walkways that I've put in. So we've got a couple more entranceways onto the scaffolding. For the most part, I like the fact it's not overly secure around the edges. It just looks a little bit more organic to my eye. Here we go. So, some reverse junk fences to give it a little bit more solidarity, for want of a better word. But I'm not going to do it all the way around, do sort of most of it. I use some of the taller ones for particularly across the back, but there's a few points where these just don't quite reach high enough. So, but I like the look of being able to see the scaffolding, but it looked a little too flimsy and spindly for the most part. Sort of mixed it up a little bit. So, as I say, we've got about 3/4 of it wrapped in junk fences, but we've also got a few bits and pieces that are still exposed and you can see, which creates a nice aesthetic, I think. Fairly standard technique, which we've seen quite a lot in this build already, which is, well, and every other one pretty much as well. Rug glitch, concrete pillar, movement into place with group select, dead easy. That one didn't quite reach, it was floating in the bottom left corner there, I don't know if you noticed. Here we have a slight issue that the pillar's a little too far back, just catching on the sort of debris there that I can't actually scrap. It's not with my current mod setup. So we'll slide this one in here and we'll do the next one. And in this one we'll make sure the rug sticks out a bit more on the other side, so we've got a bit more room on this side to work with. Set the pillar that much closer to the fence itself. Just like that. And in it goes. A little bit of fiddling, just make sure it doesn't click through too much. So the one drawback to these new pillars, which I may not use in future unless I need to measure, is that the tooltip there takes up far too much of the screen, really. It sort of gets in the way when you're building. The menus already take up plenty of room as it is, so... But otherwise they're quite handy. So this is a new addition in USO, or reasonably new anyway. Water purifiers that can be placed on land. Whereas before we had to use group select to move them after you've placed them in water. Here you can just put them straight on land, which is quite cool. So we're going to sink this one down, because the idea, sort of headcanon if you like, is that there's pipes running underneath the ground that will then feed to fog condensers set up as misters, which you'll see in a bit, and keep the place reasonably well irrigated. The other advantage to sinking it in is I can build a little pump house around the thing, and not have too much issue with it being insanely tall. As it is, it's still a little bit on the tall side, but what can you do? Partly down to the fact it's on a slope as well, I think. So, we'll line up some floor pieces along the front just to give sort of basic structure, and then get a roof on there, which actually turned out to be a lot more faff than I had in mind. As you can see here, the water purifier is getting in the way, so the roof won't snap on. So I have to raise the walls even higher, which is rather annoying, but what can you do? There we go. There are roof pieces with holes in, but as far as the snapping is concerned, they're effectively solid single pieces anyway, so you can't have things poking through, which is a bit annoying. So we've got flat pieces in there because we still have the same problem with the slanted ones on this side. However, that is far too big. It's just ridiculous for the size I need. Just really wasn't happy with that look, so I tried again, but we end up with the same clipping issue on this side, so I put a flat one in there. So you'll see in a moment, I had issues with plugging the gaps, and I didn't like the way it looked with that one bit sticking up, so we'll actually swap out these angled ones at the back for flat roofs and do something rather cool with it. Unfortunately, for some reason the wall won't snap directly onto the ones next to it. It has to snap onto either a floor or a roof, so floor it is for this one. Oh, there we go, problem solved. Stick another half-height piece in, and there we go. So the sides snap to the floor just fine, and then we just plug the gaps. For the moment, this is all a little bit too uniform, and I didn't really like it, so I came back in a bit, which you'll see, and retextured stuff, swap pieces out, that sort of thing as well. So the end result's a bit better. Doesn't really change how I went about it, it just mixes up textures a bit. So we'll zip on and plug those gaps up. And you can see I'm trying to use different pieces with different sort of damage patterns on them and stuff like that. So it looks a little bit better. Get some stairs in between the upper level and the lower level. Unfortunately, due to the angle, it'll not connect one to the other directly, but it doesn't really matter. Still works just fine, that's the main thing. And there we go. In principle, quite easy to build. Some stairs up front so we get in. So this is where the problem with the roof came in. Theoretically, these flat-topped pieces that are a bit thinner are supposed to just snap in and plug that gap. Maybe if I'd taken the roof off or messed around with the build order a little bit more for a bit longer, I could have done it, but I was getting frustrated with them snapping off, and so I didn't really like having that single piece on its own, so we'll pull the roof out and then go for a flat one instead. Just like that. So I've still got a few gaps on the outside here. So these are actually retextured walls from the metal tab, recently added in USA. And mostly down to how soft the warehouse pieces are. They push in quite easily with group select, as you can see. So we get lined up. There we go. Dead easy. I did think about doing this all the way around, but it looks a little too uniform, and I wanted to make it a little bit more ramshackle, a little bit more interesting. So we're going to prop it up with some cinder blocks, which I realise realistic would probably mean the whole thing will blow away in the first rad storm, but I have to have some kind of theory for how it's fixed down, which, to be fair, I haven't come up with. But dead simple. Don't even need to use the rug glitch for this. Just straight group select, slide them into place, and there we go. Looks like it's propped up quite nicely. A couple of single ones for the corners, just to plug out little bits of gap, make it look like it's reasonably well supported all the way around. Certainly, obviously, these floor pieces are actually sat on the earth at the back of them. That was temperamental for some reason. Yeah, they're sat on the floor pieces at the other side of it, so they don't really need propping up at the front here. Ground will do it just fine at the back. For now. There we go. One more in this corner. There's a few more around it as well, but you get the idea. I'll do the same on the inside, because this upper level needs propping up at the front. And there we go. As you can see, I've retextured it a little bit. I'm just going to go over a couple of bits and pieces just to make it look a little better. So I pulled that original wall piece I put in out and replaced it with a wooden one. So these plywood doors and boards have been added to USO. Previously they were only available in custom vanilla assets. So I'm going to sort of measure them up, see what's what works. Use this one. There's another one that does the job as well, but it's not got the board sticking off the side, so it doesn't really look like it's nailed in place quite so believably. So we'll go with this one, group select, and line it up with the floor here. Just make sure those cross boards look like they're nailed to the front rather than clipping through. It was a bit fiddly to do. Possibly because I'm a bit finicky about it, but there we go. There's the joys of using a controller to do this. It's not exactly perfect for minute adjustments, but we manage. So there we go. Same thing again on the other side. I deliberately picked this one with a big hole for changing textures, but boarding it up works just as well. This was actually quite forgiving, this particular one. There we go. So, that first one we've done needs a little bit of help to look secure. So, this time we will raid custom vanilla assets, because we have the planks angled at 90 degrees available in that. Plenty of planks in USO now, but they're all horizontal, sort of more for walking on rather than attaching to buildings. So, group select. We're going to keep the pillar as far back as possible because we're going to stand inside the building. We'll keep the pillar outside while we glitch it into place. Like this. So, same technique if you used in Negretto's Marina. Same principle anyway. Just get that positioned up. Make sure it's not clipping through too much on either side, so it sort of disappears into the support beams. And there we go. We'll do the same again a little bit further up. Jobs are good, and there you go, nice and level. There's an added bonus. This actually does clip straight through the plywood board that we've put in, so it just looks like they've nailed boards across from both sides, which is quite cool. So, onto the RV, which I'm going to turn into a shed. And I have not done my homework, so I can't remember who mentioned the idea, but the windows are not secure in this. It was suggested to me to board them up with wire fence, actually, like this. Which I did consider using plywood boards for this as well, but for the same reasons, this is not perfect. They're just too big. They wind up clipping through. It's a lot subtler with this, plus you get the daylight coming through this way. It's just a case of group selecting them in and fiddling with it a bit. The walls of the RV are obviously very, very thin, so there's no room to really bury it in. If you push it too far back, it will just be sat on the outside of the wall. If you don't push it far enough, then it just sits on the inside. Actually works quite well on this one because of the railings we've got there, the sort of supports. Looks like it's held in place by those, but the others are a bit harder to get right. This one to the right there, in particular, looks a little bit iffy if you go around the outside, but you can't really see it, so I decided to live with it. So, a little bit of decoration. This is Aston's workshop decoration pack again. Some garden tables. Just give it a bit of character for the moment. There we go. And one more table in just for the sake of it, because it's cool. And it just so happens it fits over the wheel arch there as well, which is quite cool. And we'll put some junk decoration in a bit. So for the last part of the build, I'm going to put a couple of walkways in. Or a walkway in, to be specific. Because getting up and over this piece of rock is doable for player character, but I definitely don't think any NPCs will be doing it. So we'll group select that in, using the staircase as the base for it. And that should provide us with the basis of a reasonable walkway. By the time we do the final tour, I'll probably build a few more of these in various places, just because the ground's quite uneven, and it'll give it a bit more of a finished look. Which should be quite cool. For the moment, we'll group select this one in. Goes in nice and easy. Stick some steps on the end, partly for pathing, partly for neatness. Just to make it have a little bit of support on that side. A couple of posts in. And some plywood, which we need to double up so that that bit of planking doesn't clip through. And if you stand perfectly still when you do it, it's just neat and tidy. So, the tour. So you'll come with the fog condensers for misters. Which you'll see at the end of the tour looks really cool when it starts to get dark. And it's not a particularly original idea, that one, but I particularly like how well it's worked on this one. There's a few conduits tucked away underneath the scaffolding as well, which are powering some lights to put in place. Partly because Glowing City is dark as a rule. Obviously I've got the weather turned off at the minute, but once I turn it back on it'll be quite dark. Forget about it, I should probably put some lights in here. Oh well. A few random bits and pieces add in. Some spades, some hose, some fertiliser. Annoyingly, fertiliser's too heavy to pick up, so you can't just manually place it. Which is, thinking about it, I might have been able to use OC Decorator, but I can't remember. I've not used it in a while, actually. As you can see, I've not assigned anybody yet, but I will do. Even so, I doubt most of it will actually get farmed, because it's an awful lot of food up there. Come around the side, have a look at our little walkway. Which I forgot to check if that was actually sunk into the ground, or if it was just floating, that little post there, but it turned out okay. We'll take a look at our pump house. Plenty of blue barrels to show they've got water in them, and a sack truck there to move them around on. I suppose you could roll them, but they don't roll uphill so well. A couple more bits and pieces from Aston's Workshop Chunk Decoration Pack, Workshop Decoration Pack, and a few other bits and pieces just to keep the water condenser running. And we'll take a look around the back of this place now, because I've done a little something that I didn't actually show you. It's dead easy, so you don't really need to see how to do it. But I wasn't very happy with the flat roof. It was fine, but it just looked a little boring, so I thought I'd make it a little bit more interesting. Incidentally, the building does block the view down the freeway from the sniper tower there. However, we do have that turret emplacement and guard post there, so it doesn't really matter. And I'm well aware that that rug would blow away at the first slight breeze, so we're going to have to assume they've nailed it down. What the hell, it amused me, so. A few plants and a little seating area, just to give it a little bit more life. There we go, now it's getting a little darker, you can see the misters really working. Isn't that cool? So yeah, farms can be a bit boring, but I'm pretty happy with how this one's come out. Give a few lights around the place as well. Does look very cool. Take a wander down the steps so you can sort of see a settler's eye view. It's mostly construction lights down here, which were a bit temperamental, but they'll snap onto the poles just about, so. Does help if you remember where the stairs are. There we go. So, thank you very much for watching as always. I do hope you enjoyed. If you'd like to keep up to date with everything going on the channel, you can find social media links down in the description. And I will be speaking to you all very, very soon. Thank you very much.